Welcome back. We're on to episode number 28, the late great Woodrow Wilson. He was first elected in 1912. He did win 2 terms. And technically, and I forgot this, he is a Southerner. He was born in Virginia, so he's the first Southern president voted in to office since Zachary Taylor in 1848. So we go a pretty long while without a Southern president. But he was a professor at Princeton University, becomes the president of Princeton, and then becomes the New Jersey governor. So it's not like he was running as a Southerner, but he was overtly a racist and probably one of our most racist presidents in American history. So I guess he is a Southerner, and I do make an error on an earlier episode, I think during Andrew Johnson, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I bet you if we did a poll for all his voters, did they really think he was a Southerner running as the governor of New Jersey? So it is what it is. Woodrow Wilson, his first wife, Ellen, actually died during his first term. And then he remarries in 1915, Edith Wilson. So his first wife, Ellen, dies, and then he gets remarried. His vice president is Thomas Marshall. And he defeats... In the 1912 election, he does defeat Theodore Roosevelt running as a third party and Taft, the incumbent president. So the vote is the percentage. He only wins a little over 40% of the popular vote, but he does win 40 states. So in the Electoral College, it was kind of a wipeout. But in terms of popular vote, 60% of the people did not vote for him. So he's president in the lead up to World War I. And again, I feel like this is one of those areas where we don't have a ton of info. I feel like World War I sort of is glossed over for World War II. But World War I is, is just as important, if not a bigger event, because it leads to World War II. He's also the president during the Spanish flu, which I know it's all impacting us, the pandemic. So he says nothing, never brings it up, never mentions it once. So it's kind of interesting when you think about the current response to the Spanish flu, which I call the Jayhawk flu due to its origins in Kansas. So it's from here on out, it's the Jayhawk flu. And he actually helps spread the virus. So when we get involved into World War I, he doesn't even care. He just stuffing troops into ships and sending over to Europe. So we brought the flu over to Europe, where it obviously spreads like crazy over the rest of the planet. But those ships were actually nicknamed coffin ships because so many of our troops were just dying. And Woodrow Wilson was basically like, hey, that's the cost of doing business. Like he's not a nice guy, Woodrow Wilson. In fact, so when World War I ends and we're the great victors, Woodrow Wilson's treated like a king over in Europe. Millions of people come out to see him, thanking the United States. So when they're negotiating the peace for the end of World War I, there's only basically 3 people in the room: Woodrow Wilson, the guy from France, and the guy from England. That's it. There may have been a translator in there, but just the 3 of them. And Woodrow Wilson, they now think, actually contracted the Jayhawk flu during the negotiations. And he almost starts to lose his mind over it. Like he's having psychological effects from the flu. And he gets rolled by France and England in the negotiations. Mostly because he was not a well man and his full wits weren't with him. And they're on their hands and knees redrawing the lines in Europe. The countries, the Middle East, all these places are just being made up by these 3 guys. One who's Woodrow Wilson, who's under the influence of the Jayhawk flu. So he really pushes for the League of Nations, which is basically like a modern day United Nations. But he's just not well. He comes back to America and he's trying to get it through Congress. And then he ends up having a massive stroke. And he becomes totally incapacitated to the point where his wife actually starts running the country. So if you've tuned into earlier episodes, if James Madison's not our first female president, certainly Edith Wilson definitely becomes the president. She won't let anybody else see him. She's pretends to go back to take stuff to him, but she's running the country basically for the last 18 months of his term. So, the crazy part is, even though he's not well, he wants to win a third term. He wants to try and run in 1920 for a third term. So he obviously doesn't win, but he's not well. He's never right the same again. He can barely speak. I mean, he's in rough shape after the stroke. Book recommendations. This is a terrific book. This is a must read. Again, it's a great time period. We're leading up to World War I, the women's right to vote. I mean, there's a lot going on here, that 1912 to 1920. This is an excellent, excellent book, even though Woodrow Wilson's kind of a jerk. So travel recommendations. He's actually buried in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. So you can go visit him to say hello. And then World War I Museum in Kansas City is just terrific. I went there way back when with the co-founder of the annual Giants road trip game, the P, back many years ago at this point, and it was like one of the best museums I've ever been to. The World War I Museum is a must-do, and while you're in Kansas City, go to Oklahoma Joe's Barbecue. It's in the back of a gas station. But similar advice that I've given before, definitely order more than you want, because that line stretches for miles once it's up and open. So Oklahoma Joe's, best pulled pork that you'll ever eat, and I promise you that. So that concludes episode 28, The Late Great Woodrow Wilson. Bye for now.